Declared dead, my family forged my death, burned my inheritance, and underestimated a veteran's will. Grandfather's secret plan, and a burning truth revealed. I was gone, but now I'm back for everything. The first sight of my father in nearly 5 years was a dismissive glare, as if I were a particularly unwelcome pest inspector. The air in the Greaves and Halford conference room hung heavy with the scent of lemon cleanser and raw ambition. My sister, Cora, was already settled, legs crossed, wearing that familiar smirk that suggested she'd just concluded a profitable legal battle blindfolded. Elias Thorne, my father, presided at the table's head, appearing more like a corporate titan preparing for a hostile takeover than a man attending his father's will reading. Ms. Albright, the long-standing family attorney, offered me a brief nod. She'd been a fixture since a time when I was still tolerated as one of them. No greetings, no embrace, no one cared about my recent deployment or if I'd returned whole. I wasn't there for them anyway. My promise to Grandfather Alistair was my sole motivation. Ms. Albright cleared her throat, opened a folder, and began reading the will, her voice a detached professional monotone, like someone detailing steps for furniture assembly designed to test a marriage. To Cora Thorne, she announced, the family estate at Evergreen Lake and the antique Steinway piano. Cora blinked, undoubtedly anticipating control of the company. Ms. Albright continued, addressing my father, to Elias Thorne, a first-edition collection of Hemingway novels and a $10,000 contribution to the American Ethics Council made in his name. My father scoffed. This is a joke, right? Ms. Albright remained unperturbed. She turned the page, and to Renleigh Finch, my granddaughter, my sole confidant, I bequeath the remainder of my estate. This includes all financial assets, real property, and voting authority over Braden Tech Systems. Effective immediately. Silence descended, thick and suffocating. My father's jaw tightened. Cora's smug smile faltered ever so slightly. Then Miss Albright calmly slid a check across the polished table toward me. $38,246,000. Crisp, signed, dated. Before my fingers could even brush it, Elias lunged. He snatched the check as if it had personally affronted him. You think this will bring you back? He hissed. Right there, before Miss Albright and Cora, he produced a lighter and set the damned thing ablaze. The check curled, flames dancing around Alistair Finch's signature, reducing it to ash. My sister gasped. Miss Albright leaned back in her chair, a silent witness, as though this wasn't her first time seeing a fortune torched out of sheer spite. Then my father looked at me, a cruel glint in his eyes, and declared, That's what you get for walking out. I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. I simply smiled. Not a joyful smile, but the kind of knowing smirk one wears when the final act is already written and you're merely watching the others catch up. Because what he'd incinerated wasn't what he thought it was. He hadn't seen the second envelope, still tucked securely in my coat pocket. The one Grandfather had given me a month before he passed. The one he'd wrapped in a diner napkin as if it were a sacred scroll. Don't open this unless they try to burn it, he'd instructed. They did. So I would. But not yet. First, I had to endure that polished room, filled with their feigned sorrow and genuine fury, as they began to rail about obvious irregularities. My father accused Miss Albright of forgery, painting her as a criminal mastermind with a soft spot for military granddaughters. They ranted on. Cora demanded a second reading. Elias wanted an audit. I just listened, hands resting calmly in my lap, feeling the lingering heat of the fire fade from the table as their composure unraveled. The thing about people like them is that they only grasp power when it's tangible. They believe if they burn the paper, they eradicate the proof. If they shout loudest, they win. If they erase you on paper, you cease to exist. But they didn't know me. They didn't know what I'd learned in Kandahar or the countless nights I'd melted into the shadows for survival. They didn't know what Grandfather had told me the day I left, how he'd said, You're the only one I trust to finish what I started. So when my father flicked the ashes of that check across the table and told me I was out, I just smiled. Because I already knew I was the only one still in. Beneath the table, my fingers grazed the edge of a second envelope, and I resolved I wasn't leaving empty-handed. They could argue, spew threats, or set the room ablaze for all I cared. My task was done the moment I witnessed the dawning realization on Cora's face. The empire she thought she'd inherited had slipped right through her perfectly manicured fingers. I exited without a word. No slammed door, no dramatic flourish, just the steady rhythm of my boots on the polished wood. The courthouse parking lot was half empty, just as I remembered it. The same cracked asphalt, the same old oak tree leaning by the gate. I used to climb that tree when I was 8, before Elias told me girls didn't belong in trees. That was the first time I thought maybe I didn't belong anywhere. The drive back to my apartment was quiet. I didn't turn on the radio, letting the low hum of the road and the beat of my own heart outpace my thoughts. The envelope, a palpable weight, seemed to burn a hole in the passenger seat. I didn't open it, not yet. Instead, I poured myself a glass of water and stood in the kitchen, gazing out at a street I disliked but had never truly left. The sheer weight of it all, the inheritance, the fire, the silence, was settling. It felt eerily familiar, like that other silence from years ago when I returned from my first deployment. It was Thanksgiving. I'd been gone for almost 18 months. Syria, border patrol, convoy defense, you name it. I'd watched friends bleed out in the sand and buried a journal under rubble when a roadside bomb detonated 2 feet from my tent. I still had the persistent ringing in my right ear. But when I came home, Elias simply said, "You didn't write." And that was it. No welcome home. No, I'm glad you made it back. Just a quiet judgment that permeated the room like stale smoke. The house didn't even look the same. My room was physically gone, desk removed, bed replaced, bookshelf emptied. All my letters, photos, and graduation flag had vanished, as if I'd never lived there. In their place were 2 beige armchairs, a potted fake orchid, and a framed quote about calm waters and quiet minds. I remember thinking it resembled a dentist's waiting room, except this one had a door that once read Renley and now said guest. Cora passed me in the hall, clutching a steaming mug of peppermint tea. She looked up, smirked, and said, "Don't be dramatic. You were gone for like a year and a half." I wanted to laugh. Instead, I left. I moved into a cheap apartment off the highway, taking a part-time security job at a logistics yard while waiting for the VA to process my paperwork. Every few weeks, a wire transfer would appear from someone named A. Finch, just enough to keep the heat on and gas in the car. No notes, no contact. But I knew. I always knew it was him. He never spoke much, but Grandfather Alistair saw me like no one else. When I was 12 and wanted to enlist in junior ROTC, he showed up with boots that fit and a grin, as if I'd just passed some secret test. When Elias declared the military a dead end for those who couldn't succeed in business, Grandfather retorted, "Perhaps that's why your board meetings feel like war zones." He didn't pick sides. He picked me. And maybe that's why, when he fell ill and the calls ceased, I knew something was profoundly wrong. I visited him once, just once, near the end. He was thinner, quieter, but his mind remained sharp. He handed me the envelope at Hillcross Diner over lukewarm coffee and a shared slice of lemon pie. "Don't open this unless they burn it," he'd said. I remembered thinking he was being overly dramatic. I'd offered a sarcastic remark. "What? You think they're going to set fire to $1 million check?" He didn't smile. "I think they'll try to erase you." And just like that, we both understood. I hadn't opened the envelope yet, but I was getting close. Its weight on the kitchen counter grew heavier by the minute, as if it harbored knowledge I didn't. I stared at it for a long time, half hoping it would open itself and resolve everything. It didn't. I picked it up with both hands, gingerly, as if it might bite if I moved too quickly. The envelope was thick, sealed with red wax, the kind Grandfather always used for birthday cards, as though to bestow official gravitas. I cracked it open with my thumbnail and pulled out a single folded sheet and a USB drive taped to the back. The paper was typed, notarized, and dated 3 weeks before he died. It was a trust transfer form. The check had been real, but it was merely a decoy. The actual funds were already transferred, processed quietly and legally with a digital paper trail that would have made my father sweat through his $5,000 blazer. I stared at the account number at the bottom of the page. The last 4 digits were Grandfather's birthday reversed. He knew I'd remember. I plugged in the USB. No password, no delay, just a folder labeled Inheritance. Inside, bank documents, legal authorizations, company control transfers, and something that resembled a draft of a second will. I exhaled, leaned back in my chair, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not safety, just confirmation. I wasn't crazy, but my relief lasted all of 5 minutes. I logged into my bank app to check the linked account. The app glitched. Then it returned an error. Account not found. I tried another card. Declined. I typed everything slower, as if being careful might fix whatever this was. Still nothing. It no longer felt like a glitch. I called customer service. A guy named Dylan answered, sounding like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Hi. Yeah. My account is saying I'm not in the system anymore," I said. "Can you check on that?" He asked for my name, birthday, and the last 4 digits of my social security number. I provided them all. Another pause. "It was certified by the registrar's office 2 weeks ago," he said. I hung up before my voice cracked. Next stop, the DMV. I waited an hour behind a woman arguing about a parking ticket from 2006. When I reached the counter, I handed over my ID. The clerk glanced at her screen, frowned, tapped a few keys, then looked up. "Ma'am," she said, "you're flagged as legally deceased. I'm standing right here. I get that, but the system doesn't. You'll have to file a correction through Vital Records." "How long does that take?" She looked over her glasses. "Could be a few months. End of queue." I walked out before I could punch a window. Back on the sidewalk, I felt like a ghost. People passed me normally, as if I still existed. But I'd seen enough bureaucracy to know that once a system decides you're dead, it takes a hell of a lot to prove otherwise. And someone had made damn sure I disappeared. The sky was overcast. I pulled my coat tighter. Across the street, a woman stood watching under a line of bare trees. Her sunglasses were too oversized for the dim light. A blue silk scarf looped once around her neck. My mother's scarf, the one she said the dry cleaners lost 3 years ago. She didn't wave, didn't move, just stood there, still and silent, like a threat unspoken. I stepped into traffic and crossed slowly. When I reached the other side, she was gone. No footsteps, no trace. Back at my apartment, I pulled out every letter grandfather had sent me over the years. Dozens, folded into neat stacks, tucked inside books, drawers, behind picture frames. His handwriting was steady, even near the end. In one of the envelopes, I found an old brass key wrapped in a faded handkerchief. The tag read, Langford, Box 17. He'd given it to me on my 18th birthday and said, "You'll need this someday." I guess someday had arrived. I threw on a hoodie, grabbed the key, and walked out the door before I could talk myself out of it. Langford's storage wasn't far, 15 minutes through the quieter part of town. Old storefronts, cracked sidewalks, mailboxes hanging by one hinge. I parked in front of a wine shop that hadn't been open since before the pandemic and found the door between it and a boarded-up bookstore. No sign, just a black buzzer and a faded camera that blinked red once when I pressed the button. A woman opened the door, late 50s, crisp ponytail. No name tag, no smile. "You have a key." I handed it over. She glanced at the tag, Box 17, checked a clipboard, then waved me inside without a word. The hallway was narrow and cold. Lights buzzed overhead as if they hadn't been replaced since Reagan. We walked past 6 steel doors before she stopped at one, typed in a code, and opened it. "Take your time," she said, and shut the door behind me. The room was windowless, silent, just rows of drawers set into concrete walls. I found Box 17 halfway down, waist level, and slid it open. Inside was a black fireproof folder and a manila envelope. No dust, no smell, like it had been waiting. I sat down on the floor. The first thing I pulled out was a certified cashier's check. Same amount, same name, but this time with security features baked into the paper. The watermark shimmered when I tilted it. Real. Taped to the back was a tiny red sticker, non-negotiable copy burned. That told me everything I needed to know. The manila envelope had a sticky note in grandfather's handwriting on the front. "Trust no one, not even her." No name, just her. But I had a guess. Inside, printouts of emails, handwritten notes, legal drafts. He documented everything. Every conversation with his lawyer, every asset transfer, every board meeting agenda from Braden Tech Systems for the last 12 months. Some of the papers bore Cora's name, meeting minutes she attended, contracts she signed. None of it looked casual. The final document was heavier, a flash drive inside a velvet pouch and a note. "Play only once and only when you're alone." I pocketed it and got out of there fast. Back at my apartment, I locked the door, pulled the blinds, and plugged in the flash drive. No label, no folders, just one file. A Finch. Final. I clicked it. Grandfather's face filled the screen. He looked tired, thinner than I remembered. He was sitting in the sunroom of his house in Hollow Bend. Light poured over his shoulder, a soft filter that couldn't mask the truth. "If you're seeing this, Renley," he said, "then they did what I thought they'd do." His voice was even, devoid of drama, his hand steady. He knew how to deliver a message. "I've watched them lie to your face, dismiss your service, turn your absence into ammunition, and I did nothing for too long. That ends now." He leaned forward slightly. "You're the only one who ever told me the truth, even when I didn't want to hear it. That's why I left it all to you. Not just the money, the name, the company, the ground it's built on. I'm giving you the foundation because you know what to do with it." He paused. A long silence. "Your father will try to erase you. He'll say you abandoned the family. He'll weaponize your past. He'll pretend you don't exist. Let him." Then he smiled. Just barely. Because the only thing more dangerous than a man with money is a woman with receipts. The screen went black. No logo, no goodbye. I was alone in a dark apartment with the weight of a legacy, sitting on a cheap desk I'd bought off Craigslist. I sat there a long time, not thinking, not planning, just breathing. I instinctively pulled the papers from the manila envelope and spread them across the floor. Line by line, signature by signature, cross-referencing every number, every name. In the corner of one printout was a contact name I hadn't seen in years. Beatrice Caldwell, my father's second wife. Technically my stepmother, but only on paper. She'd vanished after my mother died, married Elias within the year, and floated through life like a ghost with a perfect blowout and zero opinions. I hadn't thought about her in forever, but her name was there, right below a legal filing timestamp 2 weeks before grandfather's death, which meant she'd been involved, and not in the background. I circled her name with a red marker and underlined it twice. Beatrice Caldwell didn't surface in many conversations, but things usually went sideways when she did. She was static, never the center of the noise, just enough to distort the signal. The last real thing I remembered her saying to me was at my mother's funeral when she put a hand on my shoulder and said, "Your mother was complicated." That was her version of sympathy. I rechecked the timestamp. The filing was lodged through a small estate law firm in Charleston, connected to a property grandfather had held in trust for over 20 years. I never knew about that one because my name had never been on any deed until now. I opened the folder from the USB again and found a second address listed under confidential holdings. Langford, not the vault I had just visited, a second one I hadn't heard of. The file read, Box Array 6 Billions. Entry by security list only. I paused. My name was printed next to the line. Access level confirmed. Langford Security Vaults was 3 hours outside the city. The place looked more like a Cold War museum than a storage facility. Steel gates, motion sensors, guards with actual firearms. It's not the place you walk into with questions, unless you already possess the correct answers. I drove out just before noon, parked outside the perimeter, and walked in with nothing but the old key, the printout, and nerves I hadn't felt since Kandahar. The woman at the front desk wore a navy blazer with no name tag. She scanned the key, then looked me up and down. ID. I slid it across the counter. She scanned it, then looked up. "You're dead." "Only legally," I said. "I'm working on that." Her lips twitched as if she wanted to smile but knew better. She typed something else, then nodded. "Follow me." I did. Down another corridor, colder than the first vault. More cameras. The silence was surgical. She opened a door labeled, Array 6 Billions, and motioned me inside. No words. This one didn't look like a bank vault. It looked like a private evidence locker. I found Box 6 Billions on the middle shelf. Opened it with the key. Inside was a black briefcase and a sealed manila folder with my name in block letters. No title, no stamp. Renley Finch, underlined once, as if it needed no explanation. The briefcase clicked open with its old push-button latches. Inside, a deed, a corporate ownership ledger, a single flash drive, and a velvet-lined pocket. The deed was for the Hollow Foundation, listed as a non-profit veteran support center located on the grounds of a Charleston property. The name on the document, Renley Finch, Executive Director, sole owner. Underneath it, legal filings confirming that all holdings from Braden Tech's humanitarian division were officially transferred to Hollow 6 weeks before grandfather died. Quietly. Completely legal. No press. The ledger showed something else. Complete ownership of Braden Tech's executive shares had been reassigned through a trust mechanism that bypassed the family board. He'd handed me the company, silently, without waiting for their approval. The flash drive lit up blue when I plugged it in. Inside, another video file, no title. I hit play. Grandfather was sitting in the same sunroom, this time with files stacked around him. "If you made it to Vault 2, he said, then you figured out the first one wasn't the whole picture." He reached off camera and held up a document. "This is the transfer of ownership for the humanitarian arm. The part 1 built from scratch after Vietnam. The part Elias never touched because he couldn't monetize it. I left it to you because you never asked me for anything, but you showed up when it counted." He looked down briefly, as if to choose his following words carefully. "I couldn't stop what they planned, but I made sure they couldn't erase you. You don't need their permission. You never did. All you need now is proof they forged your name. That's your keystone. Everything else will fall after that." He looked straight at the camera. "Don't flinch, Renley. They're going to come hard." The screen went dark. I sat there, surrounded by a dead man's voice and a war he'd left for me to finish. I slid the flash drive back into its pouch and called the one person I never thought I'd need. Beatrice didn't answer on the first try, or the second, but on the third call, she picked up with that polished, rehearsed tone, as if I were a reporter asking about her skincare routine. You knew, I said. A pause. Just air between us. I didn't sign anything, she replied. I want that on record. I didn't ask what she meant. I already knew. You helped file it. I handed Elias an envelope. I didn't ask what was in it. He said it was an insurance document for estate protection. I believed him. That wasn't a lie. That was how she survived in that house. I waited. He had a notary come by. A friend of his. She stamped everything. I thought it was something boring and complicated, rich people legal. And how long ago? 3 weeks before your grandfather passed. Did you see a death certificate? Another pause. A longer one. Yes. Your name was on it. That was all I needed to hear. I didn't thank her. Just hung up. Back in my apartment, I opened my filing cabinet, the one I hadn't touched in a year, and pulled out my original social security card, birth certificate, and passport. All still in my name. I took them straight to the county registrar's office and asked to speak to someone about a fraudulent death record. The clerk took one look at my paperwork and frowned. Then she looked at her screen. I don't know how this happened, she said, but your file was closed by court order. What court? Family Estate Division. The order came through as part of a sealed emergency motion. Very rare. Can I see it? No, she said. Not unless you get a judge to open it. How long does that take? She looked over her glasses. Depends on who you pissed off. I walked out with a headache and a printout that confirmed what I already knew. Someone had filed to erase me legally, and someone else had stamped it like it was routine. Back at home, I dug into the printed emails from the vault. One name kept popping up. Dr. Alara Reed, a retired physician who used to do house calls for elite families, including mine. The emails showed she'd verified long-term mental instability and identity confusion in a letter addressed to the estate court. I had never met this woman. Her phone number was disconnected, but her address was still in the system, one town over. I drove there that night. The house was small, overgrown, and peeling paint. No car in the driveway. The lights were off, but the mailbox had mail dated 2 days earlier. Someone still lived here. I knocked. No answer, so I sat in the car and waited. 30 minutes later, a sedan pulled up. An older woman got out with 2 grocery bags. The same name was on the license plate frame, Dr. Reed. She saw me and froze. I got out and walked up slowly, hands in my jacket pockets. I'm not here to threaten you, I said. But you signed something about me, something false, and I need to know who told you to. She blinked hard, like her brain was buffering. Was it Elias Thorne? She didn't answer, just nodded, slow and shameful. He said you were mentally unwell, she whispered. Said you'd suffered psychological damage overseas, that you believed things that weren't real. He made it sound tragic, and you believed him. I signed what he gave me. I didn't know they'd actually file it. You thought he wanted fake medical records for fun? I thought it was a formality for inheritance cleanup. He said you'd agreed to it. I didn't bother arguing. Get a lawyer, I said, and don't answer any more of his calls. She didn't respond, just backed toward her door and locked it behind her. It wasn't guilt that burned most. It was how easy it had been for them, how casual. Signing me off the planet was no different than renewing a car lease. And somewhere in that paper trail, I knew Cora's name was waiting. I drove straight to the only person I trusted who'd know how to burn it down without leaving a fingerprint. Serena Vance answered the door in sweatpants and a threadbare Harvard Law hoodie, holding a slice of cold pizza and a mug of black coffee that smelled like it had been reheated twice. Her place was cluttered, lived in, and full of files that probably could have collapsed a senator or 2 if anyone knew where to look. She took one look at me and stepped aside. This better be illegal. It is. Good, she said, and handed me the pizza slice. Eat. You look like a ghost with a grudge. I know. I sat on her busted leather couch while she opened the folder I brought. She flipped through the documents like counting cards at a casino she owned. The death certificate, the false medical report, the estate filings, the ownership transfers, the check, the flash drive. She didn't speak until she reached the part with Cora's forged signature. Classic, she muttered. They filed it through a Delaware shell. Sloppy. Did they think no one would check? I think they didn't expect me to come back. She raised an eyebrow. They filed you dead? That's not coming back. That's biblical. Serena used to run a non-profit legal aid group for veterans with dishonorable discharges. She represented soldiers falsely accused, wrongly imprisoned, and gaslit by their command. She once sued the Pentagon over a housing scam and won. That was before she lost funding, quit the nonprofit world, and started working out of her living room on cases the real firms didn't want to touch. "I'll need access to your VA files," she said. "And anything you have from the military, deployment orders, discharge papers, especially anything signed." I handed her a second folder from my bag. She scanned it and nodded. "This proves you're alive. Proves you didn't agree to squat. And if we can match this signature to the one they used on the stock transfer," she trailed off, "you can take them down." "No," she said. "You can." I hadn't expected that. "You want revenge or justice?" she asked, sipping the worst-smelling coffee I'd ever encountered. "Because they don't come in the same box." "What's the difference?" "Justice follows the law. Revenge breaks it." I didn't answer. She went to her computer, typed for 30 seconds, and then said, "Braden Tech's board will be vulnerable if we hit them at their annual audit window. That's in 11 days. If you want to blow this up, that's your shot." "I want it airtight," I said. "No spectacle, no scandal, just facts and fire." Sylvia grinned. "Facts and fire. That's going on my gravestone." She pulled out her phone and called someone named Asher Blackwood. "Crow," she said. "Got a live one. Military inheritance. Fraud. Forged death, the works. Meet me at the office. Bring the clean laptop." She hung up and turned to me. "Asher's a forensic document analyst. Worked Intel. He's got the kind of eyes that can spot a forged signature at 50 yards, and he won't blink at who we're going after." I nodded. "What do you need from me?" "Full authorization. Everything. I'll draft it up. In the meantime, don't talk to anyone. Don't post. And for the love of God, don't try to play hero. This isn't the part where you go rogue. It's the part where you let me build the kill shot." I leaned back on the couch. My hands were still clenched. Serena watched me. "You all right?" I thought I was done being in wars. She shrugged. "Family ones are worse. Fewer rules." I left an hour later with a burner phone, a folder labeled Temp Legal Hold, and a direct line to Asher Blackwood, who texted me exactly 2 things before I even got home. "We'll verify every doc, but first, we find the signature that buries them." I didn't respond. I sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes and stared at the steering wheel. The last time I'd followed an order this precise, I was wearing body armor and praying no one tripped an IED. Now I was wearing a hoodie, carrying a USB drive, and about to incinerate my entire family name legally. The war had already started. This was just the first real shot fired. I tossed the burner phone on the passenger seat and drove straight to the storage unit, where I kept what no one else knew I still had. Unit 11 sat at the end of a crumbling row of metal garages behind a busted fence in South Brighton. No cameras, no contracts with any national chain. Just a guy named Dennis who ran the place and didn't ask questions as long as your rent cleared. Mine always did. Inside the unit, a black plastic footlocker, military-issued, scratched and dented like it had stories to tell. I cracked it open and pulled out my deployment binder. Orders, discharge papers, mission reports, and most importantly, hard copies of my signature from 6 years of federal paperwork. Not digital trails, not edits, all original. I drove straight to Serena's office and laid everything on the table. Asher Blackwood was already there, mid-30s, wire-framed glasses, ponytail, and a resting face that suggested he once got interrogated and enjoyed it. He gave me a polite nod, like we were coworkers in a crisis. No small talk. He picked up one of the documents, held it under a UV lamp, and then pulled out a separate folder labeled Braden Tech Equity Transfer. Inside were the documents Cora had filed on my behalf. 2 pages in, Asher grunted. "See this?" He pointed to the loop in the G of my last name. "You do this little hook on the downstroke consistently. But here," he flipped to the fake transfer doc, flatline. "No hook. Also, the signature is scanned." "You're sure?" I asked. He didn't look up. "It's a lift. Someone pulled it from a military DD-214. My guess, the 2018 discharge packet. It's public enough. Sloppy execution, though. Can you prove it?" He snapped a picture, then pulled up software on his laptop. Side-by-side comparison, line pressure analysis, pixel compression levels, overlay render. "In under 2 minutes," he said. "I can write the affidavit tonight. This would fall apart in court in under 10 minutes. Serena handed me a printout. "Here's what that forgery gave them. Cora sold 40% of your voting shares last quarter to a holding company tied to Elias's real estate trust. They're trying to roll the company under full family control before the next board vote." "My shares. She signed with my name. She signed with a fake version of your name during a time when you were legally deceased. It's not just a civil problem anymore. What is it then? Asher answered. Wire fraud, document fraud, possibly conspiracy. If Elias coordinated the notary, definitely perjury. And if the assets cross state lines, we're in federal territory. Serena leaned forward. This is the thread. We pull it right, and the whole sweater comes undone. End to probable. I stared at the documents in front of me. Seeing myself on paper, my name, my handwriting, was strange, but knowing none of it came from me. Like watching someone wear your skin and wave from a balcony you never stepped on. Serena added, I filed a preliminary injunction to freeze the company's board action, but it won't stick unless we get a judge to see this evidence firsthand. What do you need me to do? She looked me dead in the eye. Stay alive, stay quiet, and don't lose your temper. This only works if they don't know you're building the case. Let them think you're still stunned. Asher handed me a flash drive. Backup of all our findings, for your records. I put it in my pocket. The whole thing felt too neat, too logical, and that was precisely what scared me. My family didn't operate in logic. They operated in chaos, distraction, and narrative. I wasn't playing defense anymore, and they'd feel that soon. But first, I needed one last piece. A thread left hanging, one she never meant for me to see. I pulled up an interview request I denied 3 months ago and called the reporter she ghosted. His name was Kian Sterling, a veteran investigative journalist who'd won a regional Emmy for exposing a defense contractor bribery ring in Arlington. He answered on the first ring like he was expecting bad news. This is Kian. This is Renley Finch. You asked my sister for comment in April. There was a pause. Quick, sharp, loaded. You the one Braden Tech filed dead? That's me. Interesting. What changed? I'm not dead. That'll do it. We met that night in a diner just off Route 15. He wore a denim jacket and had a recorder on the table before I sat down. No pretense, just journalism. I laid it all out. The forged death certificate, the fake signatures, the ownership grab. I showed him the affidavit from Asher and the filing Serena had started. I didn't hold anything back. Kian didn't blink. He just kept jotting notes, tapping on his phone occasionally. I've heard whispers, he said, that Elias is prepping to take Braden Tech public. You can't do that clean if a $38 million asset transfer is sitting on a forged corpse. Exactly. Do you want this public, or just used as leverage? I want the truth to work harder than their lies. Copy that. He didn't promise a timeline. Didn't say when or where. Just told me he'd run it clean and tight. 2 days later, the first article dropped. Daughter declared dead, cut from $38 million inheritance. Braden Tech family power play unraveling. It hit the morning cycle like a nail through the throat. By noon, a second wave followed. Blogs, comment threads, veterans groups, corporate gossip pages. My inbox exploded. People I'd served with sent screenshots with laughing emojis. Is this for real? Texts. I didn't answer any of them. That afternoon, Elias went live on a local news station trying to do damage control. He sat in a Navy suit with his American flag pin and carefully trimmed beard, speaking in the voice he used when talking to investors. Warm, confident, manipulative. We're saddened by the misinformation being spread. Renley has had difficulties since her return from overseas. The family has done its best to support her through that process. Sometimes people lash out when they feel isolated. They rolled old footage of me in uniform, walking off a C-30, sand still on my boots. Then they showed a headline from years ago, Civilian Casualty Inquiry, Sergeant Finch refused strike order. That was their angle, that I was unstable, disgraced, dangerous. No mention that I refused to target a building full of noncombatants. No mention that the inquiry cleared me. No mention that the only reason I'd even been reported was because the commanding officer's cousin ran the contractor supplying the airstrike. They weaponized my past like it was a campaign ad. Serena called me before I could throw a chair through my television. Breathe, she said. This was always coming. They're rewriting history. They're buying time, and that means they're scared. Asher sent a message 5 minutes later. Let them overplay. The receipts don't blink. He was right. The problem with men like Elias was that they thought power made them invisible. But they'd never faced someone trained for years to disappear and strike in silence. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I wasn't their problem. I was the perimeter breach. And that made them sloppy. By 9 p.m., I had 3 anonymous tips in my inbox. All former Braden Tech employees. One worked in internal audits. One handled digital assets. One left with a severance package and a non-disclosure agreement she was about to break wide open. The third one was attached as a PDF. Asset transfer logs, transaction trail, fake consulting invoice signed by Cora Thorne on behalf of Renley Finch. Same forged signature Asher had flagged. They hadn't stopped with the stock. They'd been moving funds too. Serena forwarded the file to the district clerk, requesting an emergency hearing. I stayed up reading every line. On page 17, there was proof of payment to a legal courier service. One name listed as the contact for coordination, Beatrice Caldwell. I closed the file, grabbed my coat, and headed out before the rage settled into something quieter. The air outside was bitingly hard, the kind of cold that made everything feel sharper and more personal. I didn't drive. I walked 15 blocks to a narrow brick building where Key and Sterling worked nights out of a second-floor office above a used record store that hadn't sold anything. Since 2009. The buzzer didn't work, so I banged the glass. He opened the door, sleeves rolled, a pen behind his ear, and a look that said, "Please tell me you've got something better than your last bombshell." I handed him a flash drive. "It's time," I said. He didn't ask what was on it. Just plugged it in, loaded the video and watched. Grandfather filled the screen. No intro, no preamble, just him sitting in that sunroom again, files in his lap, voice steady, as if this was a business meeting with history on the line. "If you're watching this," he said. Then Elias did what I couldn't stop him from doing. His face was calm, not bitter, just done. He was never supposed to inherit Braden Tech. He never earned it. He never understood what it was for. He saw contracts. I saw responsibility. He saw numbers. I saw people. The light hit his shoulder just right. No drama, just clarity. I changed the will because I saw what Renley had become. Not perfect, but principled. And when you build something with the intention of it outliving you, you don't hand it off to the loudest bidder. You hand it off to the person who won't sell it the second you're in the ground. He paused. Renley is the future of this company, this family. And if they try to bury her, let this serve as record. I changed everything of my own free will. No pressure, no manipulation, just a choice made with both eyes open. He leaned forward, closer to the camera. They're going to lie, and they're going to lie big. But the truth doesn't blink. Then the video ended. Nothing flashy, no fade out, just black. Kian looked at me. "You want this live? Everywhere." He didn't hesitate. 15 minutes later, the clip was on 3 platforms, linked in a follow-up article, and attached to a press release with quotes from 2 legal analysts and a former Braden Tech employee who'd agreed to go on the record. By midnight, it had over 300,000 views. By morning, Elias's PR team was in complete scramble. His legal rep issued a vague statement calling the video emotionally charged but irrelevant to formal legal processes. That was their play, minimize and wait for it to blow over. Except it didn't. By noon, half the defense tech community had picked it up. Military blogs, Reddit forums, stock chatter rooms. Everyone had a take, and most of them weren't flattering. Cora wasn't there, probably because she knew the look on his face meant he was about to make things worse. "I understand emotions are high," he said, "but family matters should be resolved privately." Then came the mistake. He added, "This company was never meant to be run by someone with a history of mental instability and unverified claims." There it was. The mask dropped. Kian clipped that line and posted it solo. By 6 p.m., it had 2 million views. People didn't just turn on Elias, they dragged him. Veterans called him out. Shareholders questioned the ethics clause. Former employees posted anonymously about how he ran meetings like military tribunals with a god complex. Braden Tech's board issued a rare statement confirming a temporary freeze on asset movement pending an internal review. Serena called me after the statement went live. "You just cracked the damn wall," she said. "Now all we need is the hammer." I showed up to court in all black and didn't smile once. No lipstick, no jewelry, just clean lines, polished boots, and the silence filling a room before a controlled detonation. Serena told me to look like leadership. I told her I already did. Elias arrived with a fresh haircut, a custom navy suit, and 2 attorneys from a corporate catalog. His face was tight, no smirk, no eye contact. Serena told me once she'd seen Judge Harding dismiss a millionaire mid-sentence for a dramatic tone. That was the kind of judge we wanted. Serena stood as our case was called. "We're here to contest the suppression of legal identity and the fraudulent execution of financial documents related to the estate of Alistair Finch." Elias's lawyer, a smooth-talking guy named Everett Wallace, rose with a rehearsed sigh. "Your Honor, this is a family dispute dressed up in courtroom drag. The decedent's will was read, reviewed, and witnessed. My clients, Mr. Thorne and Miss Cora Thorne, acted entirely within the bounds of estate protocol." Judge Harding didn't blink. "Then you won't mind if I see the video?" Everett Wallace bristled. "Video!" Serena tapped her tablet. The lights dimmed. The monitor lit up. And there he was. Grandfather, calm as ever. If they're watching this, he said, it means they tried to bury her. But this isn't just money. It's memory. It's legacy. And if they tried to burn hers down, this is how she comes back. No one spoke when the clip ended. The silence was clean, heavy. The kind people respect. Judge Harding folded her hands. What's the defense's position on this testimony? Everett Wallace cleared his throat. It's emotionally compelling, Your Honor, but ultimately irrelevant to legal standing. Serena raised a brow. Then perhaps the forged signature, the falsified death certificate, and the wire fraud logs will provide better context. She handed over a thick binder, all documented, time-stamped, and cross-verified, including a sworn affidavit from the doctor who was misled into certifying Miss Finch's death. Cora squirmed in her chair. Elias leaned forward like he wanted to break the table in half. Judge Harding flipped through the binder for a full 30 seconds. That doesn't sound like much unless you're the one being exposed. Then came the slow nod. Let the record reflect, she said, that I find the evidence of identity suppression and signature forgery credible and serious. Everett Wallace stood again, desperate. Now, Your Honor, even if there was confusion, these events unfolded under the belief that Miss Finch had abandoned her role in the family and company. Judge Harding didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. You didn't just try to manipulate this court, she said, turning her attention to Elias. You tried to erase a person, a veteran, your daughter. Then to Cora, and you facilitated it. Cora opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Judge Harding's gavel hit once. This court recognizes Renleigh Finch as the sole legal heir to Alistair Finch's estate and the rightful controller of Braden Tech Systems and all associated assets. Everett Wallace tried to interject, but Judge Harding cut him off with a look that could crack a windshield. All transfers, sales, and actions made under false authority are hereby frozen pending criminal investigation. I didn't flinch, didn't smirk, just stood still, like every muscle had been waiting for this moment to exhale and didn't quite know how. Elias stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might break. Cora looked like she wanted to cry, but didn't remember how. Serena leaned over and whispered, You just took the throne, Finch. Outside the courthouse, the press was already gathering. Kean had a camera crew on standby. I walked right past them. No statement, no comment, no spin, just the sound of my boots on stone and the weight of my name finally sitting right. I took the long way to the cafe, letting the cold wind slap some of the courtroom weight off my shoulders. Cora picked a neutral spot, Midtown Cafe, overlit, overpriced, full of professionals pretending to be busy. She was already there when I walked in, sitting by the window with 2 coffees on the table. She hadn't touched either. When she saw me, she stood too fast, unsure if she was greeting me or bracing for impact. I sat down without speaking. I didn't know, she blurted. About the death certificate, about the will. I swear you signed it. I thought it was standard paperwork. Dad said it was part of the restructuring. I just signed where he told me to. I stared at her. She looked tired, thinner than I remembered, like the months of pretending hadn't sat well on her. I was scared, she said. He said if I didn't help, I'd lose everything too. So you chose survival. Her hands shook slightly as she wrapped them around the coffee cup. I didn't think you'd fight. You always just left. That's because I knew what happened when I stayed. I didn't mean for it to get this far. But you let it. Cora blinked fast. You have to believe me. No, I said. I really don't. She nodded, looking down at her lap. I wasn't trying to hurt you. I thought I was protecting what was ours. Ours never included me, Cora. Not once. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. You didn't just sign a form. You signed me off the map. You stood there and watched them light it all on fire. I was stupid. No, I said. You were careful. Stupid would have been forgivable. She wiped at her eyes with the cuff of her coat. So what now? I took out my phone and set it face down on the table. It had been recording since I sat down. She didn't notice. I'm not pressing charges, I said. You'll get whatever's fair under the law, but you don't get access. No seats at the table, no stake in the company. You're not part of the rebuild. Her voice cracked. I'm still your sister. And I'm still alive. That didn't seem to matter much a few months ago. I stood up. Renleigh, please. I looked down at her, at the half-finished version of someone who once braided my hair before school and whispered secrets under the covers. But there was nothing left there I needed to hold on to. You picked your side, I said. And now you get to live with it. Outside, the wind had picked up. I zipped my coat and kept walking. Past the train station, past the people with umbrellas fighting the wind, past the places we used to eat together. None of it felt like it belonged to me anymore. And that was fine. I wasn't trying to reclaim what was lost. I was building something new with hands they hadn't broken. And Cora, like the rest of them, would just have to watch. I stepped off the sidewalk and crossed the street without looking back. Keys already tightened in my hand. The building was small, red brick, squat between a florist and a shuttered laundromat. The windows were tall but scuffed, as if they'd been ignored long enough to forget they ever let in light. The front lock clicked open easily. I stepped inside. Dust, silence, the kind of emptiness that made room for something new. This was it. The address on the envelope Grandfather had marked. Start here. It used to be a print shop back in the 60s. Then a piano studio. Then nothing. Now it was mine. I sat cross-legged on the floor, took out the last envelope from the vault, and opened it slowly. Inside, a sketch of the floor plan in Grandfather's hand, a half-completed business license application, and a note with 4 words underlined. Make something they can't erase. So I did. I called the county office and fast-tracked the license. I reactivated my LLC from 3 years ago, Finch Insight Group, which had never really taken off but never officially died either. Within a week, permits were filed, contractors scheduled, paint colors picked. 2 weeks later, the sign went up. Finch Foundation, Veterans, Women. Forward. It wasn't flashy. No ribbon cutting. No press photos. Just me and a guy named Marcus, who'd served 2 tours in Kandahar and now ran a non-profit building rehab program for women vets. We drank burnt coffee and signed the paperwork on the front desk counter. What are you hoping to do here? He asked. Build what I needed 10 years ago, I said. Marcus nodded like he understood more than I was saying. The Foundation's first project, a legal fund for female veterans navigating discharge disputes and post-service housing instability. Second, a mentorship program connecting young women in ROTC with seasoned female officers. I called it Operation Second Voice. Grandfather would have hated the branding but loved the fight. Serena joined the board pro bono. Kian ran the press release through his network. Asher helped set up the data security infrastructure because I trusted 3 people in this world, and he was still one of them. The money wasn't an issue. I had control now. I didn't need to fight for scraps. I needed to make the scraps into something sharp enough to cut through. And for the first time, the work felt clean. No more boardrooms full of knives and smiles. No more pretending I belonged to people who only saw me as leverage or liability. One morning, I received a letter from an old P.O. box I hadn't touched in years. No return address, just a crumpled envelope with handwriting I'd know anywhere. Inside, a photo of Grandfather and me at age 7, sitting on the porch. Both of us, wearing matching paper crowns he'd made from birthday gift wrap. On the back, in his handwriting, takes more than fire to stop royalty. I pinned it to the corkboard in my office. No frame, just thumbtacks. Clients came. Partners signed on, the space filled. Not all the wounds healed. Something stayed bruised, but the building stood, and that was enough. One night, I stayed late to clean up after a vet group session. Empty coffee cups, old paperwork, chairs out of place. I turned off the lights, locked the door, and stood outside for a second. The street was quiet. The sky was clear. I didn't feel like a daughter or a soldier or a ghost. I just felt solid, like I'd finally stepped into the version of me they never saw coming. And there wasn't a damn thing they could do about it. I reached for the deed, still tucked in my bag, and walked toward the courthouse steps like I owned every brick beneath my feet. The building looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe it was the silence. No reporters, no family members faking concern. Just an old stone worn down by years of other people's stories that never made the news. Inside, the clerk barely glanced up before stamping the final confirmation. Transfer of deed? Effective immediately. 1 copy for the county, 1 for my file, 1 in my hand. The seal gleamed under fluorescent light. Official. Ugly. Beautiful. I walked back out without stopping. No photos, no announcements, just my boots on concrete and a document that meant something more than property. It meant they couldn't rewrite me anymore. On the sidewalk, I paused and turned to face the courthouse. I held the deed before me, not high like a trophy, just enough to see it against the stone, and took 1 photo. No smile, no caption, just proof. I turned the screen off and slipped the phone into my pocket. 5 blocks later, I reached the new studio. Not the foundation, not the office, just a narrow storefront I'd quietly closed on 2 days earlier. No one knew about it yet. That was the point. Tall windows, scuffed floors, echoes in every corner. It smelled like dust, old paint, and the kind of beginnings that didn't ask for permission. Inside the envelope Grandfather had marked final, I found a folded business plan, half complete, with notes in his handwriting suggesting a training center for women vets for career shifts for starting over. He'd written, Some legacies aren't inherited. They're built brick by brick. I spread the plan across the floor and started mapping it. Budget columns, outreach goals, renovation estimates. My handwriting didn't match his, but the mission did. I didn't build it out of revenge. I didn't build it for applause. I built it so no one would have to claw their way out of a grave their family dug for them. A week later, the final paperwork cleared. The studio became the pilot site for Finch Forward, a transitional hub for women leaving military service. Counseling, career guidance, housing referrals. No flag waving, no slogans, just ground beneath your feet and people who didn't flinch when you talked about the dark. Marcus offered to help run the programming. Kian wanted to write a piece on the launch, but I told him to hold it. Let it grow quiet first. Let it grow real. I didn't need the story anymore. I had the building, the work, the peace that comes when no one is trying to silence you mid-sentence. One morning, I passed Cora on the street near the foundation. She saw me, paused, didn't wave, didn't speak. Good. I didn't hate her, but I didn't know her space in a life she tried to sign away. That same day, I got a letter from Lena, who'd been dishonorably discharged for speaking up about harassment in her unit. She found our website. She didn't ask for money. She asked for someone who'd listen. I called her that night. We talked for 2 hours. It wasn't about trauma, just about where to begin. When we hung up, I wrote her name at the top of a fresh file, Client 0001. And that was it. Not an ending. Not a victory lap. Just a door opening that no one could close behind me this time. I stood at the studio window later that evening, watching the streetlights flicker to life. The glass still had streaks. The floor still needed refinishing, but the space was mine, and I didn't need to reclaim the past. I was busy laying down the future. One brick, one name, one decision they'd never get to rewrite. The heater kicked on behind me with a low hum, and I didn't move. Didn't rush, didn't rehearse a speech for anyone who might ask how I got here. Because the answer wasn't complicated. They tried to erase me, and I built something they couldn't touch. No spotlight, no throne, just a foundation made from what they tried to burn, one that would outlive every lie they told.